What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter von Panda here. Hey, I kind of went on an iPad spending spree, and there was kind of good reason for it. So I want to just kind of share with you some of my thoughts. So I've been relatively slow to adopt the larger sized iPads. I actually started with that because that's the first iPad that came out. But since then, I've been on an iPad Mini 4, a great little iPad, as you can see here. But what I've recently changed to is the iPad Pro 10.5 inch. Now, the bigger size for a long time was 9.7 inches, which is what we have here. And this is called the new iPad. And it was released or unveiled at Lane Tech here in Chicago. And so it's an interesting kind of middle iPad. And I'm going to talk about actually what I really like about this iPad 10.5. And then a couple of the things that I really, really hate, and I think are big misses for Apple at the moment. Now, there is a larger iPad Pro, too. It's like a 12-inch or something like that, which is like having a notepad or something like that, which I don't have here. But I wanted to kind of cover some of the more of these middle consumer sizes. Now, first of all, I was really struggling between the new iPad and the bigger iPad. And ultimately, what decided it for me was a couple of things. One, it's the capacity. This iPad here, the new iPad, goes up to 128 gigs. And this is what this is. But this iPad goes up to... and I don't know if it's a terabyte, but I was able to get the 256 gig here, so quite a bit more storage than this. Now, you might say, well, it's only twice the storage, but because so much of it, the iPad storage is used by the OS, you actually only get kind of that usable space. So even though it's 256 versus 128, and you're saying, well, you're only getting another 128 gigs here. Well, I may only have like 60 usable gigs to begin with here. So yeah, if I'm putting on movies, that's maybe only 30, 40, 50 movies. Whereas if I put them on here, all of a sudden I have 30, 40, 50 movies plus 100 movies. So I've got like 3 times the usable space, even though I've just, I appear to only have 120 gigs. Now, okay, now let me show you here. This is the gold one. This is actually beautiful. I've been using it a little while. A couple things that you might notice right off the bat is that the camera housing sticks up a little bit. That ends up being a little weird when you put it down. Now, I haven't put a case or anything on it. I've ordered some silicone or the TPU cases. I was thinking of maybe going to a Logitech Bluetooth case. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's really thin. And that's where it brings me to what the differences are here. Despite the fact that we have a 9.7 and 10.5, and actually what I would like is the 9.7 inch display because it's a little smaller. What you can see here is that actual size between these two is almost an inch of difference on the screen, but you can see the bezel on the top of the new iPad is quite a bit thicker up here than it is right there. It's a little bit thinner. Even though you get about another inch of screen on the iPad Pro, you're actually only adding a little bit of length and width to it. And so I thought that's a pretty good trade-off. I didn't mind having a slightly larger length and width. But the big advantage here is that, this is probably going to be really hard to demo, but it's actually thinner. The iPad Pro is thinner than the new iPad. Now, when it comes down to, your actual experience with it, I don't know that you in the hand are going to really feel it. In fact, I guess I can feel it when I'm putting back to back. But when you're just holding yours for a long time, and especially if you put a cover on it and things like that, you're probably not going to feel it. So this one is actually started to really become, I don't know, one that I really thought, maybe I should switch to this one. Because I'll be honest, the little bit thicker design kind of build of it actually lends it to a little bit better balance. I will say that one of the things I don't like about this is it feels really thin. And so when you're holding it up, and because of its large size, I don't know, it feels like it's going to break. It feels like it's going to just fall off. It's not, obviously, but it's just kind of one of those things where you're like, wow, this is really thin. The difference is, even though it's about as thin as this, because the iPad Mini is so short, it never felt like that. Now, the one thing I really liked about the iPad Mini is I could grab it like this. I could carry it almost like a phablet. It was really super portable. This one is not. And in fact, when you type on it, if I'm typing up something, so let's say I go to Expedia.com, and in fact, if you're traveling, check out my link to Expedia.com to get a sweet deal on your next travel. And I put in a city here. You can see how big this keyboard is. Now, there are a number of things you can do here. This keyboard button here will give you some options of like splitting it and doing some things where it makes it a little easier with 2 hands. On the iPad Mini, though, it never needed anything like that because you could easily reach things. Now, most of the time you can see I'm holding on with my fingers kind of on the edge, and I will type with my thumbs like that, but it that's okay. Now the trade-off is that if I put it down, it's almost like typing on a keypad, like a normal keyboard for a laptop. So that's kind of the nice thing. The other nice thing is that even though they have, I think this is the A8 processor and this is the A8X, the good thing about it is that it splits the screens the same way, but it's much more usable because of the much bigger real estate. So if I split screen it here between YouTube and email, you can see the email is just a lot easier to read. On the iPad mini, everything starts getting really small, right? So a lot of times you're doing something like this to read the email. And the bigger screen and the bigger real estate makes this a lot more impressive. The other thing I will say here, and which was actually a surprise over especially this middle iPad, is that they have speakers all the way around. So one of the very first things I noticed using this over my iPad mini is that on the mini, when you're holding it, which is often like this, you're covering up the speaker here. And so what you learn to do is kind of be very cognizant of where those speakers are so you're not covering up, so you still get good sound, especially when you're watching YouTube videos. What I noticed here is I was kind of worried about covering the speakers, but it doesn't matter because you have speakers on this side, you have speakers on this side, they produce a lot of sound, and there's pretty much, even when you're holding it two hands, sorry for all the fingerprints, that's just the nature of it, like this, you've got two speakers, at least two speakers that are uncovered, and so you have really good sound overall. Now, look at the middle one here, and they have speakers on the bottom, none on the top, so that is an advantage over the middle iPad. Now, let me get to something else here. What you'll see is on the bottom, we have what they call the smart dock connector. These three little metal connectors here on the bottom, and then if I show you the new iPad, right, nothing there. And that's because this will connect to, and I should say not on the mini either, this will connect to like the smart keyboard cover. Now I don't have one of those, but I will tell you that they're starting to kind of make some sense to me. In fact, because what I've realized what I do on my MacBook most of the time is either surf the web, respond to emails, sometimes do some iMovie. Those are all things I can do on my iPad Pro, particularly if I have a really good keyboard. Now, I love the fact that it's not Bluetooth, so if I disconnect it, I'm not worrying about it. It's not connected. I don't have to worry about, oh, is my Bluetooth keyboard on in my backpack, and I've got my iPad, and now it keeps thinking that I'm connected to an iPad. That's definitely happened before. So the smart keyboard connector is kind of clever, and that's something that's on my radar. I might do that, and to be honest, it might replace my MacBook. Ugh, I hate to admit that, but that it might. Now, the other thing that I wanted to throw out there is that what I don't like, and kind of the biggest one, and I feel like Apple is philosophically resistant to this, is I don't feel like there's enough size variation on the screen between the mini and these other two. So the problem is going from basically a 7.9 8-inch screen to basically a 10-inch screen or larger. There really should be an 8-inch screen in here. It's really missing a device right here, and that's the one I really want, because the mini is great, but it's just a little bit small for me, especially if you want to use it with a keyboard or something like that. It's just a little too small to have, an arm's length out like a laptop screen. What I really want is something, in that 9-inch screen size range, so I can use it as a handheld and it feels normal as a handheld. I can use it as a small kind of emergency laptop, but isn't so big that when I'm holding it like this, it feels big. This can get a little tiring, I'm telling you. I've been using this a while, and to have something like this kind of pressing on your hand, you find yourself doing two hands with it and kind of embracing your arms a little bit. So I really like it. I'm going to keep using it. But I think an 8-inch screen, and I'll be honest, I don't know why they do kind of not 8-inch, 9-inch, a 9-inch screen, and they do some kind of weird size, but whatever the right proportion is, 9.1 or whatever it is, or 8.9 or whatever size that would make sense, so that all of the scale would stay the same, would be a really good fit. The other thing is these two, which you might not expect, to work with the Apple Pencil. I've never used that. I don't really know that I need that. The Mini does not. And so even though this new iPad, kind of being a middle of the road one, works with the Apple Pencil, I think is actually a pretty nice feature. So we might try those out at some point. But I just wanted to kind of give you my thoughts, just my opinion on the iPad Pro versus the Mini versus the new iPad. If you want to pick up any of them, I'll put links to them in the description. They're actually pretty well priced, I think, for what you get. Peter from Panda, out!